Well, hey folks, in this chilling case, two adult sons are charged with the brutal murder of their father, sparking a debate about what led to this horrifying crime. Was this a calculated act of revenge for years of domestic violence within the home? Or is there something even darker at play? The story is going to take a disturbing turn with the rumors that the mother might have been involved in the conspiracy. Did she play a role in this deadly plot? Or is she simply a victim of circumstance? Well, hey everybody, welcome to Profiling Evil. In this edition that we're coming in on, it's the case of Iowa versus Alec Jones. Welcome to Profiling Evil, and thanks for hitting that like and subscribe button. Make sure you're sharing Profiling Evil with all of your friends. So let's jump into this case. After being charged with first-degree murder, the mother of a 26-year-old boy named Alec Jones and his brother, Nathan, told the local press in Fort Dodge, Iowa, that her sons were, quote, good boys, and that she doesn't know anything about the murder that occurred downstairs while she was in her bedroom upstairs. I guess that means she didn't even hear the 5 or 6 gunshots that rang out so loudly they could be heard 5 houses away. So stay tuned as we delve deep into the facts, the legal proceedings, and the questions that are remaining unanswered in this shocking case. Now, Shannon Jones is the wife of the victim, and she and her husband apparently got into an argument before this shooting occurred. You know, it seems, according to all of the media reports that are out there, that domestic violence was a common theme inside this home. And I hope you'll go to my other videos on domestic violence and domestic violence homicide. The dynamics in this case were even more wacky than you may have thought, as testimony in the Jones trial has continued to reveal things about 55-year-old murder victim Dennis Jones. This guy also was living in the house with his wife and his 2 sons and his younger girlfriend, living in the home alongside everyone else. Talk about a recipe for challenge within the home. Now, the defendant, Alec Jones, claims that he shot his dad in the head 3 times, I might make a point of, 3 times in self-defense. Now, there's a 911 call from the father just before the murder occurs that provides, I think, deeper insight into this dark plan of murder, where Dennis Jones told emergency dispatchers that he was worried that his sons were going to try to shoot and kill him. They were walking around the house in gloves and apparently making threats. Now, the full 911 call will probably come out in the trial, and hopefully the manner in which law enforcement responded to that 911 call will also come out, because it wasn't until they looked at the 911 call later when they found his body that they started to put 2 and 2 together. Regardless, hours later, it appears that Dennis Jones was murdered in his home, and then his body was disposed of about 10 miles away in a ditch alongside of a county road. Now, there was no real effort employed by the people who dumped the body, presumably Alec Jones and his brother Nathan and their friends, but there was no real effort employed to hide the body from being discovered, outside of tossing a rug over the body and throwing a dirty t-shirt that happened to belong to the defendant over the head of the victim. The prosecution, in their opening statement, made an incredibly short opening statement, about 10 minutes. I'm going to put that at the end of this video for those of you who would like to watch it in its entirety. I just want to spend the remainder of the time on this video simply laying out what I think is powerful evidence that's going to lead to the quick conviction of murder for Alec Jones. You see, sometime between April 25th, 2024 and April 26th, 2024, Dennis Jones was shot and killed inside of his home. His home is in Fort Dodge, Iowa. Now that's the crime scene. But his body was discovered by a passing postal worker in a ditch alongside of a county road about 10 miles south of the victim's home or the murder site. So the disposal site and the murder site, two different locations. Investigators were able to determine from the evidence that the disposal site probably was just a disposal site and that the victim was killed somewhere else. After they resolved his identity, they figured out it was Dennis Jones, and they went to his home and realized that was the crime scene. The crime scene was secured, including the sons and the wife, and the investigation launched into full swing. Now, I joined Court TV's Ted Rowlands to talk about this case as the trial is going on, and to talk about the work law enforcement puts into these kinds of cases. In this particular case, I believe the officers quickly realized who the key players in this murder investigation were and where the murder actually occurred, as opposed to the dump site or the disposal site where the body was recovered. Let's watch this.
You know, as a former police commander, you could appreciate good detective work. And in this case, it was interesting because the kids right away say, I didn't do it, you know, it wasn't us. And then the investigator that conducted the interview was very open to, well, your dad was a scoundrel and he was hitting your mom. And they really were able to shift. These kids now they admitted it. And Alec, to, you know, large degree, admitted to shooting his dad and killing him. Boom. I mean, that is the way it should be done. And now we're seeing it all play out in the courtroom, all of that hard work during the investigation.
Yeah, I think the law enforcement folks did a great job of picking away at the case, taking the evidence that they're seeing and corroborating it with testimony that they're receiving. And they clearly understood from the beginning that these boys were probably involved. I suspect there's a lot of evidence that's going to come out that ties them directly to that. Footprints, probably fingerprints, and I'm saying fingerprints that might be like infused with blood or other kinds of things that really tie them to it, because you can't blame them for being in the house. They lived there.
Well, as the investigation unfolded, the window of the murder seemed to kind of narrow, likely occurring sometime between 11:30 p.m. on April 25th and 12:30 a.m. on April 26th, so about an hour period of time. Now, as investigators dug into the case and looked at Dennis Jones's day before the murder, they realized it was a pretty normal day. He went to work, getting home about 4:30. And consistent with other days, it sounds like, especially from things described in the media, it was a fairly normal dynamic to have domestic violence going on in the home. And a fight broke out between the mother, Shannon, and Dennis, the father, the victim. The victim's younger girlfriend was also present at the time that this was all happening. And again, keep in mind, she's living in the home with the victim in this case, the defendants, and the defendant's mother, the victim's wife. Now, the victim's wife, Shannon, said she went upstairs to her bedroom after the fight and didn't hear or see anything else, including the homicide, where 6 bullets were shot that were loud enough to be heard down the street. Now, Mrs. Jones' son, Nathan, was at a bar called the Bootlegger, and the defendant was home at the time of the murder, at the time of the fight. The defendant, after the argument, went upstairs with his mother. Now, he would later tell police that he then came back downstairs and only his father was at home. The girlfriend apparently left the residence. Prosecutors were pulling no punches in the opening statement. They described the atmosphere in the home as caustic at best. In fact, Prosecutor Bailey Taylor said in her opening statement that Alec was sick of his father. He was sick of living in the circumstances that they were living in. He was sick of the way the household was being run and the environment that was there. He was sick of his father's girlfriend, and he decided to take matters into his own hands. He started by texting his brother Nathan to find out where he was. And he wanted to know in those texts when Nathan was coming back home. He even went as far as texting his brother and saying, quote, "Somebody's going to end up dead." The prosecution claimed that Alec even drove over to the bar where Nathan was hanging out and drinking and retrieved his brother and brought him back to the residence prior to the murders. The prosecution even claims that Alec drove over to the bar where his brother was hanging out and retrieved him, bringing him back to the residence where the murder ultimately occurred. Well, at approximately 11 o'clock p.m., they got home, and this is all captured on surveillance cameras, and also inside of the home from a bedroom of Dennis's, the victim's, where he had a surveillance camera. It's about that time that Dennis makes this 911 call where he says he's concerned that his sons are going to shoot at him and murder him. He said, quote, "Something weird is going on. I think my children, they're walking around with black gloves on. I think one of them might shoot me," close quote. Now, he also texted his daughter, who didn't live in the home, and he told her something to the effect of, "He thinks Alec and Nathan are going to do something to me." Clearly, he felt like something was going to come to head in this thing and that he was going to be a victim. Now, outside of the house, 3 friends of Alec Jones waited in a car. Now, they were there because they had been called by Jones to come to the house and wait for him to come outside and then pick him up, take him back to the bar. They complied and they waited outside for about 15 minutes, they say. And while they waited, 5 or 6 shots came from within inside that house. They could see the flashes, and the flashes were actually captured on closed-circuit television cameras down the street. Within minutes of those flashes, Alec and Nathan ran from the house, jumped in the car, and said, "Go, go, go." The car sped away. Well, when the vehicle was about a block away, they ordered the kids to turn around and go back to the house. Within moments, the car left again, but this time it drove west over the Domains River, where Alec tossed a handgun, out of the window and into the river. In a strange twist, they then instruct their friend to drive him back to the house where they carried Dennis Jones's body out of the place where he was murdered, and they put it inside the trunk of the car. They then drive southbound out of the city limits into the county, again about 10 miles, where they dump Dennis Jones's partially nude body into a ditch. Now, to further conceal his body, the only effort they put into it is they throw a rug over him, and Alec Jones tosses his dirty t-shirt over the head of his father. Once they've kind of symbolically washed their hands of Dennis, they go to the bar where they drink until the bar closes. And the bar it closes about 2 a.m. Now, I think you'd really be interested in what the witnesses who didn't know what happened in this crime scene thought as they walked into the crime scene when they were taken back to the house.
All right, the direct examination of this friend who found himself in the middle of a cleanup after a murder. Mike King is with us. He's a retired police commander and is the host of Profiling Evil. Mike, good to see you. The case seems very strong at this point in this trial, and this witness really brought you there with his sort of subtle but informative dissertation on what took place while getting rid of Dad's body there and throwing him in the ditch.
Yeah, this guy clearly doesn't want to be in that courtroom today or yesterday, and he is being pretty darn clear about the things that he saw. A couple of things I think that are really interesting in his testimony, Ted, are that, number one, he didn't have the emotion of being involved in the murder, but now he's got all the emotion of witnessing this horrendous crime scene, and so he's reliving that even as he sits there. But you can see him continuing to look, I think, at the defendant in the case, again, this is probably his friend that he's maintained a relationship with, even though he hasn't been able to talk to him since this thing happened. And he doesn't want to necessarily hurt his friend, but he clearly understands he's got to tell the truth of what he's seeing. And so we can see him kind of vicariously reliving the experience of walking through the inside of this crime scene. And we got to keep in mind there are two separate crime scenes. There's the location where the murder happened, and then there's the disposal site. And I think he's giving a pretty clear and accurate depiction of what he's seeing, and you can almost feel what he's emotionally sensing and feeling.
Yeah, reliving it, all of it, moment by moment.
You see, after the drinking, the evidence is showing that they returned to the house and started to clean it up. So they enlisted their friends to come and help clean it up. Although one friend, Aiden, says he didn't participate at all. He just stood there staring and taking it all in. They patch bullet holes in the walls. They try to spackle over the holes and actually paint the holes. But they're so disorganized you can see the paint smeared and running down the wall. Testimony suggests they tried to clean the residence, including throwing things away. Now, when police began questioning Alec after the discovery of Dennis's body, they quickly realized that there are a number of discrepancies in his story. Now, at the end of this 2.5-hour interrogation, Alec Jones confesses to the entire thing, stating he shot his father. He threw the gun in the river, and he took his father's body and he dumped him in a rural part of the county. That is going to be incredibly difficult for this guy to get over and to keep from having a jury weigh really heavily. So it doesn't appear that there are many questions surrounding whether Alec Jones murdered his father or not. The big question is, how much was Nathan involved? And we may not know. I suspect we may see him testify. And whether it was a planned execution, or if this was truly a case of self-defense, as some people are theorizing he's going to use as his defense. But let me be really clear about my opinion at this point, given the facts that we have out in front of us, and the fact that we haven't heard from the defense yet and what their defense is going to be. I think this guy is facing an incredibly tall uphill battle that he's not going to win, and he's going to be found guilty really quickly.
So far, what do you think of this witness? And can maybe the defense make some hay with her on cross?
You know, I don't know if the defense is going to be able to do much with her. To me, the value she's really bringing is the premeditation, that they were putting together a posse. They were heading over to the house to confront the dad. Now, whether or not Nathan knew and was drinking and trying to build up his nerves beforehand, that's going to all come out, I guess, in his trial, but it's clear.
Hey, so what are your thoughts about the mother, folks? I think it's pretty clear that domestic violence occurred, if you believe the media reports, perhaps regularly in this house. But could she really have gone upstairs into her room and not heard the gunshots? Gunshots that were heard 5 houses away?
But then you got this entire story of domestic violence and the things that are going on in the relationship, the wacky relationship the father apparently has with a girlfriend living in the home, the mother in the home, the boys witnessing the abuse, hearing about the abuse. And you know, something that keeps bugging me about this case, Ted, is the mother's testimony in the short little video clip with the news person outside of the home, where she talks about, hey, I went upstairs and went to sleep. There were a heck of a lot of bullets being shot in that house. If you follow that crime scene and look at the amount of bullets that were the holes that were covered up, you hear testimony of Nathan picking up spent casings that were ejected out of a round as they're either chasing this guy through the house or continuing to fire in one location, and it paints a picture of chasing him. This thing is full of all kinds of twists.
Sure is. And then the video that we did see today from the neighbor, where you heard the gunshot wounds or the gunshots outside the house, down the street, and the idea that she was in the house and was some people are sound sleepers, but police, I mean, yeah, you're right. What is her role in this? And I don't know, it's a head scratcher.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting if testimony comes out that she had anything to do with planting the seed that he's got to be gone and that things have got to change, and that the boys and their mom are going to be a lot happier at home if dad's out of the picture and his girlfriend's clearly gone. So it'll be interesting, and you can't take away from the fact that she's also a domestic violence victim if, in fact, all of what's being kind of portrayed publicly is accurate. So her ability to think is probably pretty skewed too.
Yeah. In fact, the boys had to have endured a horrible situation at home if, to your point, what we are hearing is true about what was going on in that house. And you wonder if that will be taken into account by this jury or not. Maybe if he takes a stand. Well,
now, the witnesses for the prosecution seem pretty darn credible to me, even though in some cases they're considered participants in this crime. Sure, they have a reason to participate with the prosecution, but there aren't any promises if something comes up in testimony that puts them back at the crime scene with a heavier role that they haven't already excluded.
All right, this witness, solid, seems very honest, at times saying, yeah, I drank a lot that night. Memory was hazy, but also crystal clear on the most important part of it. Here to discuss, retired police commander and host of Profiling Evil, the podcast, also the author of the book Deceived, Mike King. So overall, what do we think of the cross, I guess, establishing that, hey, you're hoping for a good deal here, and we're supposed to take everything you say with a grain of salt? What'd you think?
I think the defense brought in a really clear point that, number one, he's there because he's got a deal, because they've got to show some kind of weakness or a chink in the prosecution's armor, which I think they're having a really difficult time finding. But it also made it very clear that this witness isn't promised anything. If it comes out that he's lied or there's something wrong with his testimony, he could face charges. And so he's got a real motivation to be honest about everything he's seeing there, Ted.
Yeah, he did seem like a kid that was caught up in this and gets a call, and next thing you know, he's helping to move a body. Very traumatic, and prosecutors have obviously, they haven't charged him yet, and they likely won't.
Which leaves me with the question of, how do you feel about this victim, Dennis Jones? Now, many have given him the category of a not likable person. But did this guy deserve to die? I shared my opinions on Court TV in this regard, and I wanted to share them with you and also remind you that you can catch the 10-minute opening of the prosecution's opening statements at the end of this video. So as I wrap up, I hope you'll catch my comments on why Alec Jones is going to be convicted of murder, in my opinion.
Again, we talked about the way out for this young man, and the state in their opening statement told the jury that this victim is not a likable guy. He's not a good guy. How does that factor in on a investigation and then a prosecution when, at the end of the day, nobody's that upset that the victim was killed? Or you can see why the motivation was there. It was not just an innocent person.
I think the defense has to really play on a couple of key points here. Number one is that this is a man that reportedly has been involved in domestic violence inside the home. The children have witnessed it probably throughout their entire lives, that they're all living in a really goofy situation, that clearly he's not likable from the standpoint of the Father of the Year award, but the guy is still a victim of a homicide. And that's the thing that the defense is going to really be facing, and the prosecution has to continue to pound home, is that, yeah, he might have been a crummy guy. And again, I'm using maybe everybody else's terminology because I don't know the guy, but he's still a victim of crime. His kids still hunted him down and shot him inside that home. His kids still took him and dumped his body in a field. And it was clearly completely disorganized the way they did things. He was obviously where he could be found quite easily. And all of it shows how disorganized they were in this thing and how much anger was involved. And then they clearly, Ted, went back and tried to dress up that crime scene and stage it so that it looked like nothing ever happened there. So I think they've got a really tall mountain to climb.
Yeah, try is the key word there. They didn't do a great job, but they absolutely attempted to clean up, paint, and do all the rest of it, and investigators right away noticed.
Well, what are your thoughts, folks? I hope you're going to put them down below, and please take time to weigh in on each other's comments, formulate your own questions, and have some dialogue back and forth. Be professional, courteous, and kind with each other. Now, here are my closing thoughts on this case.
His kids still hunted him down and shot him inside that home. His kids still took him and dumped his body in a field. And it was clearly completely disorganized the way they did things. He was obviously where he could be found quite easily. And all of it shows how disorganized they were in this thing and how much anger was involved. And then they clearly, Ted, went back and tried to dress up that crime scene and stage it so that it looked like nothing ever happened there. So I think they've got a really tall mountain to climb.
Yeah, try is the key word there. They didn't do a great job, but they absolutely attempted to clean up, paint, and do all the rest of it, and investigators right away noticed.
And I say them with an invitation for all of you to take time to visit Profiling Evil on our website, profilingevil.com, and make sure you're signing up for the BOLO. And remember, you can find Profiling Evil on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter. And please check out Profiling Evil podcasts on your favorite podcast platform. Hey, thanks so much for supporting Profiling Evil through your donations, your super chats, and through purchasing books online at profilingevil.com. Remember, if you buy one of my books, I'm going to personally sign it to you and personalize it as a thank you. Hey, we'll see you soon at the next crime scene.
This case centers around the Jones family. They live here in Fort Dodge, Iowa. Now, it's a different family setup. The household consists of Miss Shannon Jones, mom, Mr. Dennis Jones, dad, Nathan Jones, and the defendant, Alec Jones. In addition, in the household, there's also Mr. Jones' young girlfriend. It's interesting, different, but it worked. It worked for the Jones family until the defendant decided it didn't. On April 25th, 2024, it was a normal day. Dennis Jones went to work, came home around 4:30. Everyone seemed to be home, and there was an argument between Dennis and Shannon. The defendant and Mr. Jones's girlfriend were at the home at the time. Like I'd indicated, families are different. This was a normal day for them. The argument occurred, it dissipated, and everyone went about their way. Miss Jones retreated upstairs. Nathan Jones was at a bar with some of his friends. The defendant went upstairs with his mother. Mr. Jones stayed downstairs, and his girlfriend left the house. Now, at approximately 10 p.m. that evening, the defendant started a string of behavior that ultimately led to the death of his own father. You see, the defendant was sick of his father, sick of living with him, sick of the household he was creating, sick of his girlfriend, all of it. So he took matters into his own hands. He started messaging his brother. Where are you? Are you coming back? Went so far as to indicate to Nathan that somebody was going to end up dead that night. Those are the defendant's own words that you will see. He went to bootleggers. He picked up his brother. You'll see him on video surveillance walk into the bar. You'll see what he's wearing. He grabs Nathan. They go back to the house. At approximately 11 p.m., the defendant is there with his brother. And you'll see on actual video surveillance from the house, inside the house, that Dennis Jones, he had to have a video camera in his room. And you'll see him on that video camera, looking out the window, slowly walking around, peeking out of his door, going in and out of the room. And you'll see the defendant walk in his room. You'll hear a phone call made to Webster County Dispatch at approximately 11:24, where Dennis expresses to the operator, something weird is going on. I think my children, they're walking around with black gloves on. I think one of them might shoot me. At 11:31, he texts his daughter, who no longer lives in the house. I think that Alec and Nathan are going to do something to me. During this whole time, Aiden Pate and Michaela McNeely are sitting across the street in their car. Nathan had asked them to come there and pick them up and take them back to the bar. And then you'll see from video surveillance of a neighbor, 5 or 6 shots. You'll see the flash. You'll see someone running out to the car. Go, go, go! The car drives off. There's also an individual who will testify regarding location data from the whole evening that follows some of the cell phones. One of our investigators will put that together. The car drives around the block. And you'll hear Aiden and Michaela testify that per the defendant's instruction, they go back to the house quickly. Then per the defendant's instruction, drive down to the river. He throws the gun in the river. Per the defendant's instruction, they go back to the house. They take his father's dead body and put it in Aiden Pate's trunk. Per the defendant's instruction, they go out by Otho in Webster County and dump his father's half-naked body in a ditch with a rug thrown over it and the defendant's dirty t-shirt placed over his head. And then per the defendant's instruction, all 4 of those individuals, they go back to the bar. The defendant goes back into the bar, drinks, stays till close. Then they go back to the house, and per his instruction, they clean it up. Patch bullet holes, paint over some stuff, throw away the dirty towels, and get rid of the bloody rug. Then he goes to bed. That night, the evidence will show you was a calculated sequence dedicated to hunting and killing Dennis Jones. The defendant is taken with investigators and he goes and gives an interview. He sits down with Sergeant Van Waffs, Detective Allie Thompson, starts talking to them, tells them about his night last night. His story changes and changes again and again. You'll hear that 2.5-hour interview, and you'll be able to detect how many times that story changes until Investigator Headland comes in and starts talking to him. And then the defendant coldly describes what happened that evening. He shot his father, threw the gun in the river, took his body out to Otho and dumped it, went back to the bar, cleaned up. You'll hear it. Now again, like I said, families can be different. You'll get to judge this family yourself. Even the defendant says in his interview, there were some normal arguments. It happens. Again, an interesting dynamic. But what the evidence is going to show is that between April 25th and 26th, the defendant stalked, planned, and calculated to kill his own father, and did what he had to do to cover it up. Now, it's the request of the state of Iowa that you carefully listen to all of the testimony, view the exhibits, and at the end of this trial, you will see the actions, the sequence, and the statements made by defendant Alec Jones. And we are confident that at the end of this trial, you will return a verdict of guilty to murder in the first degree.